Paranormal Activity 3 starts in 2005, where a pregnant Christy receives an old box of VHS tapes from her sister Katie. We jump to 1 year later, where Christy's house is ransacked, and the only things apparently taken are the tapes. See where this is going? The tapes are home videos of the sisters in the late 80s, so as you'd imagine, this is yet another prequel. Don't you love it when a story progresses backwards rather than forward? Little did George Lucas know that when he made the Star Wars prequels, he'd be starting a long-running Hollywood trend. Before The Phantom Menace, people just didn't care as much about backstory. Aside from seeing Katie and Christy as kids, we also meet the adults, their mother Julie, her videophile boyfriend Dennis, and the girl's grandma Lois. During Katie's birthday party, we see little Christy off in the background talking to her invisible friend. That's pretty normal, right? A lot of kids play with invisible people. Dennis is the precursor of Katie's future boyfriend Mika, in which he can't keep his hand off of a camera. His basement is filled with video equipment, too. Was this normal in 1988? I thought non-linear editing was a fairly new technology in those days. I mean, you didn't just go down to your local Apple store and buy a Mac. But I digress. Feeling rather randy one night, Julie and Dennis attempt to make a sex tape when there's an earthquake. As the dust falls, we see the outline of an invisible person. Usually when a kid plays with an imaginary friend, they're usually, imaginary? The paint-by-the-numbers formula begins when Dennis's BFF Randy suggests that he place cameras around the house to capture any weird events. Dennis captures Christy talking to her Invisibuddy in her bedroom, and when he confronts her about it, she reveals the demon's name to be Toby. It took you guys 3 films to come up with that name? It gets deeper into the mythology. At one point, Dennis finds a demonic symbol drawn inside the girl's closet, which comes to play at the end of the film. It plays with the idea of a cult of witches that originated in the 1930s. Maybe one day we'll actually go back that far. How'd you like that? Paranormal Activity 5, the silent film. On a technical level, the third film doesn't do all that much different. It mimics the multiple camera setup of the second movie, which is fine. I mean, what else could they do with the cameras at this point? There's one angle they haven't used yet, where the camera pans from side to side like your traditional security camera, but they don't use it to its full potential, and it's basically used for a few run-of-the-mill jump scares. The actors seem to be putting on more of a performance. At this point, they kind of have to. Making it too realistic could have potentially detracted from some of the dramatic elements, but it's noticeable.
Fucking books, this isn't Casper, the fucking friendly ghost you're chasing, man.
At its core, Part 3 is just a rehash of the first 2 films, and isn't nearly as effective. It's more subtle, saving most of its jump scares for the third act. But a good balance is what made those first 2 movies work so well, and at the end of the day, this one just isn't as memorable. It was a neat idea to go back to these kids' childhoods and witness more of the story unravel, although I have to admit, isn't it convenient how all the major areas in these girls' lives concerning the demon was caught on videotape? But I digress. It's not a bad movie if you started to jump onto the Paranormal Activity bandwagon, and honestly, the story is intriguing enough to leave you wanting more. It's amazing how big the story has gotten since the events of that first movie, and even though the plot was getting pretty outlandish at this point, everything gels well together. It's not like those terrible Saw films where you can't tell one installment from the next. Each movie in this franchise covers a different period in time, making them all the more memorable. However, because this one is so distant from the rest of the movies, including the 4th film, which actually is a sequel, it serves mainly as pure backstory and doesn't offer anything new for fans of the genre.